I am Rich the Lich, and in today's video, I want to talk about the 3 pillars of adventure. This video is sponsored by, it's not sponsored, but I'm going to drink some coconut water really quick. Hold on. Let me make sure. I don't want to ramble to you and then not have started my microphone. Okay. So this is on page 8 of the Player's Handbook. I'm going to read this. The 3 pillars of adventure. Adventurers can try to do anything their players can imagine, but it can be helpful to talk about their activities in 3 broad categories: exploration, social interaction, and combat. So before I go into sort of DM mode, let's quickly talk about why you want to talk about their activities in these 3 categories. Well, every table, every group is going to have preferences, right? The easy one is combat. A lot of players just like combat. I think the system, 5th edition, leans towards that anyway. If you look down at your character sheet, 90% of the things going on there, all of those buttons that you can push, they only come on board. Those buttons only become pressable, activatable, when you as the DM says, roll initiative, right? If you don't say roll initiative, there's a lot of feats, stats, there's a lot of things that just magic items that don't really have a lot of value, right? But the reason why you want to be able to focus on the 3 pillars of adventure, I don't want to say equally, because you do need to gear it, for the most part, the entirety of your adventure or your campaign, gear it towards the style of game that you and your players like. But the reason why you want to weave through all 3 and use them all is quite simply because it helps with pacing. If 4 sessions in a row, you've had combat, 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 and the last session was combat from beginning to end, as soon as you started the session, it was either a climactic battle, it was a boss fight, it was just random encounter after random encounter. This happens a lot in dungeons, right? It's kind of like you're going into a really dark place that you know is filled with monsters. You kind of know what to expect when you're in there, okay? So you do want to change the pacing. Also, even though the whole of the group prefers, and oftentimes they will prefer one of these 3 categories. Although the core of the group prefers combat, you may have players that really enjoy the exploration part. You might also have a player that's playing a character that really excels at the social interaction part. All of their points are in persuasion and insight. And maybe that real life player is a salesman, right? They're quite savvy at talking, selling people on things. Yes, they want to be able to contribute in combat, but they really enjoy when you throw in the social interaction parts. So you want to fill all 3 of those. Now, I talked a moment ago about you're going into a dungeon, right? And the players kind of know you're going into this dark, evil, horrible place. You may not get a long rest. It's probably going to be sort of a battle of attrition where how long can you stay in there before you need to leave and finally get some sleep to get your spells back? But you know this place is filled with monsters. It's just fight, fight, fight. Oftentimes what can happen is these 3 blocks can be very segmented. They can be very sort of predictable. This happens a lot, of course, when you're doing pre-published stuff. Adventures that are already written for you, right? Because what it says is, if the PCs failed that stealth check, read the following. And in that next text block, you read to your players something like this. As you approach the bend, you turn the corner and you hear this cackling sound. And then you hear the shuffling of feet and the scraping of like a spearhead against a wall. But like a dozen of them. And turning the corner is a small little tribe of goblins. Roll initiative. Right? It tells you right there, jump into the combat pillar of gameplay. When you're starting to read, right? And imagine you push your dice away, your dice tray away. You don't have any terrain on the table. You don't have any miniatures. Your PCs, or your players, I should say, don't see you opening up a monster manual. And you just sort of sit back in your chair a little bit. And you say, as you leave the beauty of the forest, the canopy subsides and the sun finally comes through, trickling down on grassy lands. Up ahead is the mountain range, and there is the spire. You can tell. The players will just kind of know, okay, Mr. Rich is in exploration mode. The barbarian who's just antsy to hit something, they want to get into a fight, that player, they're not white-knuckled anymore. They're not getting ready and, getting all their dice in order. And what is it? You turn all your D6s to 6s, you turn all your D20s to 20s, and you're ready to go, and you're looking at your feats, and you're, right? Because they kind of know, it's predictable. We're either in exploration mode or we're in social interaction mode, but we're not in combat mode yet. We may get there, but you can start to notice that there's these separations. And what happens with that, though, is you lose that sense of interest and intrigue and wonder, because you may not know how to weave these three pillars of adventure together. So now that we've established why it's important to have all three in varying amounts and quantities, and we've talked about how it can be very easy to create them as sort of blocks, I want to show you how to mesh it all together to create just a well-balanced game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to step into Dungeon Master mode here. So let me drink my coconut water. People have been clamoring about Eberron, so I'm going to throw this in Sharn, okay? We're not going to get into too many Sharn specifics, but for sake of just having a background, we're in Sharn. Here's the setup, okay? I'm the Dungeon Master. Listen to my words, my friends. You have all been summoned to Sharn. Some of you may have actually been here before. One of you has grown up here. Now, you were quick upon reaching adulthood to see the world, begin your life as an adventurer, as it were. So while you have been in Sharn before, you certainly have not seen all of it. You've seen barely 10% of what Sharn has to offer. Regardless of whether you've been here before or how long your stay was, one thing is certain. Sharn has all the wonders of Eberron. You see it in front of you. You see it above you. As you step onto the cobblestone street, you hear, and you look up. There's a large wing. It's a flying ship, but you've been on flying ships before. You've boarded flying ships. Perhaps you took a flying ship to get here. What you're seeing up above is like a new model. It's equal parts magic and wonder of the flying ships of Eberron and invention, new technology. There's a wooden wing acting as sort of a sail. There seems to be almost like a bit of Modron technology, a bit of steampunk. It has this vibe and feel of something that could have been plucked directly from a Miyazaki movie. And you're seeing this wonder and technology, this ingenuity in front of you on the streets as well. There's a half robotic being, a very tall, lanky, kind of looking like Lurch from the Addams Family, maybe 8 feet in height. A bit of that, the pale-skinned, bald albino, if you would, from the movie Prometheus, I think it was. Take that, torso up, definitely male, but lower body is gears and almost looks like pistons and rods and metal pipes and poles, giving this, whatever he is, whatever race he is, some form of locomotion. A very elaborate prosthetic. You're seeing all walks of life in front of you, all races. Now, why you're in Sharn is to meet with a man by the name of Rupert. Supposed to be a very wealthy man, among one of the wealthiest in all of Sharn. You're all low level, you're only level 3, and among the group of you, total party pool, you have at best 40, 50 gold. There's a wizard among you, and you could use more money. You're attempting to and desire to add more spells to your spell book, but that costs. Many of you would like to upgrade your armor, but that costs. The roguish or bardic among you wish to have a little bit of coin to use as leverage, a little bit of bargaining power. This individual, this Rupert, promised if you take care of the problem he has, which hasn't been discussed yet, he will offer the group of you 750 gold. He will give that to you as a reward. Now, you at least know what sort of district or what quarter of Sharn Rupert is in, but the specifics, still a mystery. Now, I'm going to back up a moment and pull out of DM mode. Notice how I'm coming up with this right here on video, okay, on the fly. I'm not reading something. And I have not used this before. Now, notice how I create options and take almost like the concept of, I'm going to put an exploration door, a social interaction door, and a combat door in front of you as the players. And then I'm going to sort of pause, sit back, answer questions. Not literally going to do that, but that would be the idea of what would be happening if you and I were sitting at the table. And I'm going to see which doorknob you put your hand on as a group. And maybe a couple of you put your hand on one doorknob and decide you want to go the social way. And a few of you want to go the combat way. But by offering all three of those doors, what I've created is the foundation, sort of the adventure hook. You know why you're in Sharn. You're looking for Rupert. You need to find this individual. But now what I want to do is I want to weave all three pillars of adventure together. And what that offers is it allows you as the group, you as the player, to let me know where you want to go. And if you use this sort of this system, if you will, or the things that I'm offering to you, the tips and tricks and the words that I'm saying of how I do this, if you use this, you'll give yourself an out. You won't pigeonhole your campaign, your adventure, your session into this was only exploration, but yet your players are clamoring for combat. Or you only have combat, or your players can tell when it's combat, and those that are waiting for exploration, they can tell when that's coming. Okay? You're in Sharn. You know you have to meet with Rupert. Now, to your left, as you stand on the cobblestone street, your initial thought is, let's just ask. Let's find a town crier. Let's look for someone that looks like they're a resident, right? They're not just rolling in with adventuring gear and backpacks. Someone that looks like they've stayed here a while. Or let's ask one of the guard or the militia or something like this. Let's get some directions and give them a couple of these little checklist points that might get us towards the area where Rupert is supposed to be, right? But as the DM, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you that when you look left, you're going to notice there's this winding alley. Has a little bit of a Diagon Alley look, right? It's quite foreboding in a way. Like the buildings are a little off kilter. They're leaning in, sort of beckoning you into this little tunnel. Like, please come inside. Now, the roguish among you, you're quite intrigued with that. That looks like a place where you might be able to get some poisons, maybe some illicit drugs. That might be a place where you can get some information as to the presence and the whereabouts of a possible thieves guild here. And not only that, the architecture, the environment of that alley, which seems so different than the path ahead of you. That creaking, dark, foreboding alley ties right into your skill set. There's shadows everywhere. You should be possibly even getting advantage on your stealth checks. But your keen eye looks down that alleyway. And you notice on the rooftops, it seems as though you can definitely tell there's a bipedal, a human-sized figure. There's kind of a shadowy figure on each of the roofs, left and right. And you notice what looks like the front of either like a crossbow bolt or a bow and an arrow. Someone or something has a bead on you. And you make mention of this to the tanks in your party, the barbarian and the paladin. And very quickly, the barbarian steps up front, grabs around his great axe, and is ready for battle. Meanwhile, a man approaches. It's certainly not Rupert, but someone that can tell you're visitors. He has a large board with like a ledger on it, just a single scroll kind of tacked onto that board, and he has almost like a piece of charcoal, and he's writing something down, and he approaches you, and he asks where you're headed. Now, there's a part of you that immediately thinks this individual might be able to point us in the direction of Rupert. But there's something else. Go ahead and make me an insight check. Pulling back from DM mode, talking to you on video. The result of that insight might prompt me as the DM to say, you're not sure if you want to tell this guy what your business is in the city. You don't know if you trust this guy. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I mean, yes, I'll wrap up, but that's where I'm going to leave our little exchange of player to DM. We've been presented with an adventure hook. Meet Rupert. You're going to do some work for him, and he's going to give you gold. The gold is your reward. It's something that you can all benefit from at low level, at level 3. We've given us a background. There's Sharn. You've indicated and given some description of the technology, the amount of races. When you're leaning into that first pillar of adventure of exploration, think of what that would mean to a child. Like, I want to explore the woods behind my home. I want to explore the barn. I want to explore that haunted house. There's always an element of mystery, of intrigue, of danger, of wonder, of suspense. Create that. By creating that little bit of descriptive element in the alleyway, the rogue may want to explore that. And also, you've given a sense of confidence to that rogue because you mentioned how they might be able to sneak and skulk efficiently because there's shadowy corners and things are dark. See, you've mentioned that weird flying ship up above. If questions come from that, you can say it looks like there's like scaffolding or stairs that lead all the way up to this landing up there, where you might get some more information if you have an artificer in your group. Exactly what technology is that? That's something I'm fascinated with. Who is that robotic guy that's, the RoboCop dude that's walking down the alleyways? You've given some little prompts. You've placed the door of exploration in front of them, and now you're offering it to your players, and you're seeing if they want to grab that doorknob and open that door. But you've also created a very heavy potential combat element immediately. The barbarian is all systems go. He's telling the rogue, where the hell are those guys? Why are they pointing at us? Right? Social interaction. You have the paladin. You have the bard. The charismatic of the bunch. They're weaving through deception, persuasion, insight. This guy might be able to give you information to help you just beeline to your goal, which is to find Rupert. But why is this guy approaching us? Am I able to sort of, not sleight of hand, but, am I able to disguise my intentions of like creeping and just peeking and seeing what's written on that ledger? Maybe it's a warlock book. Something deep and dark. But you've created, or I've created, because I'm awesome, all of these, I've filled all 3 pillars of gameplay all within that one situation. See, I didn't just say, you need to meet with Rupert and allow the players to sit back and say, we're not going to fight right now because we're going into social encounter mode. And if you keep doing that, right, you lean into where they're pulling, which doors they're opening, you'll create dynamic gameplay. You'll kind of cover all the bases and offer all the categories to the players, to your group. And you won't kind of pigeonhole yourself as the DM either. You'll give yourself a way out. You have something to run with. And if you reverse engineer that whole process I went through and you kind of think about it from a prep and planning point of view, you can now plan each of your little instances where the DM is about to speak and describe. Think of what descriptive elements you can start to gameplay for and write down these little bullet points of how can that description lead into combat? How can that description lead into social interaction? If you remember, I talked about how combat can be funneled into this very predictable thing where you read in the little stat block or read this to your players where they fail the stealth check, goblins come around the corner, that we meet face to face, roll initiative. But even in a situation where on paper, the obvious screams to you and obviously to you as the DM, you know what's happening. But if it screams to the players, we're about to fight. But what if the goblins come around the corner and then you say, and instead of saying roll initiative, there's a goblin in the back, and he has this banner, and on the banner is this large symbol, and Paladin, the lawful good Paladin, you notice the symbol on his banner is the same thing that's on your vestments. What you've done is you've taken something that went right directly into combat, and you've paused it just enough for the Paladin to consider this might be a social interaction moment. Hold on, guys. Wait. Don't kill them yet. Did he steal that? Are we about to hit lawful good goblins? And they're just looking aggressive because they're defending territory? Just by adding in that little banner. But what if now the goblin's like, ah, and then one of them steps and twists his ankle ah, and falls to the side, and you hear the crumbling of rock, and then wait, what's the sound of water? As rock splashes, kind of guessing about 80, 90 feet down. But then, immediately after the rock splashes into this pool, below you guys, below the goblin, you hear... There's something below you guys. So even if you go into the combat, even if your barbarian is like, the hell with it, they came around the corner, they're aggressive, charge! And you go and attack, when that combat is over, you've now given yourself a way out to move into exploration immediately. If a player is kind of like, oh, dude, what's below? What is that noise? Okay, sorry. It's my turn? But the fact that they even got excited about that, that tells you you now can go into the exploration portion. But if everyone seems to gloss over, oh, don't mess with it, I don't know what's down there. They don't want to go the exploration route. Maybe they want more combat, in which case you can say another group of goblins comes around the corner. But notice how you've taken something that at face value says, this is where we're going, and you've been able to weave into and out of and within and give yourself variety and excitement. That's what I got. My coconut water is getting cold. Wait. Well, I want it to be cold. It's getting warm. I'll see you guys soon in the next video. See you later.